Hi there family, welcome to the first section of this how-to video. In this section, I'm going to be sharing with you the various pieces of equipment that you will need to make use of to make your live stream possible. I'll also share with you some of the specifications for the pieces of equipment that you'll need, as well as some of the options that you can make use of, some of the variations that you can use depending on what you have available. I'll also give you some examples of where you can buy these items from. Obviously, being from South Africa, the examples will be relevant to South Africa. However, for our international audience, I'm sure that you can also make use of Amazon and other online services or other stores to get similar pieces of equipment. So the first piece of equipment that we need to make our live stream possible is obviously a video camera, because you're going to want to have a video source to capture the sermon, to capture the praise and worship and various other parts of the service. And as you can see on the table right now, I've got a bunch of options available here, or a bunch of examples of what we can use for cameras. So the first one and the most obvious one being a cell phone, which is what we used in part one. You saw it there. I showed you how to set it up and all that kind of stuff. And the beautiful thing about a cell phone is everyone has one. However, the setup for a cell phone for live streaming is sometimes a little bit more complex, as you need to download an app onto your phone, you need to install a program on your computer, and then you need to configure it correctly. But the beautiful thing, as I said, is everyone's got one. So the cell phone is the first option of a video source for live stream. The second option I'd like to discuss is the webcam at the back there. At the back, I've got the Hikvision webcam, which is the one I've bought for the ministry. And this is a beautiful webcam. It works really well. It's got a nice wide angle. It's got fixed focus, so that it's not moving and focusing and trying to lose focus and gain focus all the time. It's got low light correction, which is another specification that is quite important for these webcams, and it's full HD. So this webcam is kitted out. It has everything that it needs. And the beautiful thing about the webcam is it's not that expensive. This particular model is around 600 Rand. And as you can see on the screen right now, I'm showing you an example of where I bought it from. And another webcam that I'd also recommend is the Genius webcam, which you can see on the screen right now, which some of the churches that I've worked with have also used. As a matter of fact, I would prefer the Genius webcam over the Hikvision, just because I think the quality is slightly better. If you look at these, if you go to the websites that they're on, you can see the specs that they have, and these are the specs that I would recommend. Now, you can get many other webcams for cheaper or more expensive. You've just got to weigh up the odds at the end of the day. Whatever you do though, I would not recommend compromising on quality, because I went and bought one that was about 250 Rand, and the quality was so bad that I literally had to return it. So when it comes to webcams, don't compromise on quality. Rather spend the extra buck and have the better video quality. The reason I recommend the webcam would probably be one of the items I'd recommend the most, because of its simplicity. A webcam literally just plugs in via USB cable. Your computer will automatically install the drivers for it, and Bob's your uncle. You're good to go. You don't have to worry about anything else. You've literally got your webcam, plug it in, and it works. And then you've got a video feed. So the webcam is the easiest option, and it's relatively cost effective as well if you want to go that option. With the cell phone and with the webcam, the thing with them is that you're usually going to need to put them relatively close to the pulpit, sometimes even right up in front of it, like a meter or 2 meters away. And the reason for that is because these cameras usually have a slightly wider angle lens, so they have to be closer so that you're not getting the entire church in the shot, but rather just the pulpit or the stage or whatever it is that you need. So that's the disadvantage. And another disadvantage that goes with that as well is your sound desk isn't usually sitting right next to the pulpit. Your sound desk is usually sitting, at the back or the side of the church or something like that. However, this is easy enough to fix. All you need to do is go and buy a USB extension cable. Depending on the distance, you can get a 10 meter or a 20 meter one, and then you run that USB extension cable from wherever your webcam or your cell phone is all the way to the sound desk, and then that'll obviously allow you to connect the two to your laptop over the distance. The next option I'd like to discuss is the Handycam on the left there. This is basically just a regular personal use handy cam. But the nice thing about these is they're relatively inexpensive and they've got a bunch more extra features than what you'll have available if you use your cell phone or a webcam. The handy cam will usually have zoom and autofocus and face tracking, just depending on the model that you get. So I would also strongly recommend a handy cam. However, as I said, it is slightly more expensive. You're probably looking at spending 2 to maybe 5,000 Rand for a decent one if you buy it new. However, if you jump on Facebook Market, there's many of them secondhand that you can get for under 2,000 Rand. And then you have it. You've got an awesome camera that gives you great quality that you can zoom in and zoom out. And you can then obviously like set it up on a tripod and get somebody from the church to pan it left and right and tilt it up and down and all these kinds of things to follow you while you're preaching, if you like me and you don't like to stand still behind the pulpit but rather move around. So the handy cam is definitely a nice option. However, it also requires an extra item. It's not just plug and play like the webcam, and that item is a video capture card. As you can see right now, this is the one that I use. There's a whole bunch of different options that you can get, some good, some bad, some with lots of, sort of multiple video sources that you can plug into it. However, the one that I've just shown you is one that I bought from Takealot for around 350 Rand. And for me, this one serves its purpose perfectly. It does everything that I need it to, and it produces great quality video. These are usually not things that you will find in your regular cell phone or electronics store, so I'd recommend looking for it online, finding one that suits you and going and buying it. As I said, this one works perfectly for me. The nice thing about this video capture card is it gives you a variety of options of what cameras you can plug into your computer. So you can obviously plug in the handy cam, you can go and plug in a DSLR, you can even go and plug in a professional studio camera if you've got one available, just using that video capture card. And the way it works basically is on one end, it's got a USB male that you plug into your computer, and on the other end, it's got an HDMI female. And the HDMI female, you basically run an HDMI cable from that HDMI female straight into your camera if it's got a port. That is something I must mention as well. It is important that if you're going to go and buy a camera, or if you're looking to see if your camera will work, you need to make sure it's got an HDMI output of some kind. So if I turn my handy cam on and open it up, you can see there it's got the various ports. And this one in the middle is the HDMI output. Now that might not look like a normal size HDMI, and that's because it's not. It's an HDMI mini. So if you're planning to run a regular HDMI cable, you will need to get an HDMI to HDMI adapter to plug into that. But the nice thing is, if you're buying it new, these things usually come with the cable included. So you literally plug it in there, and then you plug the other end of the cable into your video capture card, the video capture card into your computer, and there's your video source. It's as simple as that. The nice thing about this option as well is if your camera is slightly further away from the laptop than, sort of like a 3-meter HDMI cord, is it's simple enough to go and buy a long HDMI cable. You can get 20-meter HDMI cables, and that will basically allow you to run a cable from your camera that's up to 20 meters away from the sound desk to the sound desk, and it'll still maintain the quality and the like. So with the video capture card, as I mentioned earlier, it basically opens up your options of what you can plug into your computer as a video source. I've just discussed using the handy cam, and as I said earlier, you can also basically make use of a DSLR or even a professional studio camera if it's got the right output, and then you can run that 20-meter HDMI cable to be able to connect it at a distance to your computer and the like. So that brings me to the next one I'd like to discuss, which is the DSLR over there. For this example, I've got my Nikon D700 there, which is an older model DSLR. However, it has what it needs to be able to live stream or to be able to send signals to the laptop. And that is basically on the side over here. You can see that it's got an HDMI port just like the Handycam. And that is a beautiful feature because it basically means that we can use it like the Handycam as a video source for our live stream. And then the same would basically apply for any DSLR or any studio camera. If they've got that output, you can plug it into a video capture card and into your computer, and you've got a video source. Some of the newer model DSLRs also have the option to be able to connect it to your computer as a video source via USB cable. You'll just need to see if that is an option for your camera. The DSLR is obviously a nice high quality video, and so is the studio camera. However, these cameras can often come with a couple of complications. So with these cameras, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to turn off the on-screen display, whereas your Handycam, or at least the Canon Handycam that I've got, I literally have to change one setting and all the on-screen display is off. Whereas with the DSLRs, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to do that. And sometimes I've seen with the DSLRs as well is the aspect ratio isn't always 100% right. You want a 16:9 aspect ratio for your video, and the DSLR doesn't always have that. So consequently, you get all stretched out and stuff like that, depending on the model DSLR camera that you're using. The one church that I worked with, they've got Canon DSLRs, and it completely messed up the aspect ratio. It put black frames around it and stuff like that. So even though DSLR gives you good quality, it sometimes comes with complications. So if you're looking at using a DSLR, I'd recommend testing it out first, seeing that the video looks right and that the aspect ratio is right and all of that. But the DSLR is probably the most complicated one to make use of. So I wouldn't recommend it in a hurry. And obviously it's also as we've seen on the table, it's the most expensive item as well. So my personal recommendation, or my two personal favorites out of the items that I've just mentioned, is the webcam for its simplicity, and the other option is the Handycam for the bunch of features that it has, but it's obviously slightly more expensive. The cell phone's also nice because it's something that we have, but as I said, the setup is quite complicated, which I'll explain to you later. And then obviously the DSLR is the most expensive option with the best video quality, but also depending on the model of camera you've got, sometimes it has the most complications. So there you have it. These are the various cameras that you can use. With that video capture card, it basically opens up your possibilities to what you can use, which is the beautiful thing about it. So that's the basics of the video cameras that you'll need. The next item that you're going to need is a laptop, which is pretty much the most important item on this list, because without the laptop, nothing will work. So your laptop is obviously a critical piece of equipment for your live stream service. So in this section now, I'm going to share with you some of the specs that you need to look for in your laptop. Okay, so the next piece of equipment that we need is one of the most obvious ones and one of the most crucial ones as well, because it's where the magic happens, and that is either a laptop or a desktop computer. And this is the most important one at the end of the day, because it's where everything comes in and where everything goes out to our church service as well as to our live streams. So on the screen right now, you can see the laptop that I use for the majority of my live streaming videos and stuff like that. And this one isn't the greatest laptop in the world, but it's not the worst either. And the specs of our laptop is what's going to make or break our live stream videos, because there are certain minimum specs that each laptop or computer needs to meet in order for us to be able to live stream. Because if our laptop is too slow or it doesn't have the resources that it needs, it's going to cause a laggy live stream. It's going to cause issues, and we just don't want that. So there's a way to check. If you've got a laptop or a desktop that you want to use for your live stream, there's a way to check if what you have is sufficient for what you need for the live stream. So to do that, you're going to basically go into the search on your desktop. You're going to click on the search icon, and you're going to type in system information, and you're going to choose system information, and system information will then pop up on your computer screen. So the first and probably the most important thing you need to look for, because some of the other ones are upgradable, is your computer's processor. And if you look on system information, if we go over here, you can see what processor I have inside this computer. You can see it's an Intel Core i7 4700, basically with 4 cores and 8 logical processors. So that is what we're looking for. So my recommendation, a minimum recommendation for a processor on a desktop or a laptop, is an Intel Core i3, i5 or i7. If it's running a Intel Core 2 Duo, an Intel Celeron, or a Intel Core 2 Quad, those are very old processors, and consequently they're not going to have enough processing power. Even some i3 laptops and desktops, the processor of an i3 is sometimes too slow, but I'll get more into that in a second. So there are also AMD processors that are out there. They're becoming more common on the market. However, if your computer's older, chances are it probably doesn't have that. The majority of computers and laptops from a couple of years ago back are Intels. Now, this laptop particular is a 2014 model laptop, so it is quite old, but because it's an i7, it's still running strong. So the way to tell when your laptop was released more or less is to look at the number series on it. So you can see it says Core i7 4700. Now that determines the model of our processor. So because it's got a 4 at the beginning, that means that this particular laptop is running a 4th generation i7 laptop. If it has a 2 or a 3, it's a 2nd or 3rd generation. And currently, as things are at the moment, they go all the way up to 11. So depending on that first number, whether it's a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11, it determines what generation your laptop is. Now, if it's a 3-digit number, like a Core i7, call it a 930, just those 3 digits, then it's a 1st generation. I would recommend steering away from the 1st generation i3, i5, or i7 simply because of their age. They're not much different from the Core 2 Duo and the Core 2 Quad. So I would recommend at least a 2nd or newer generation Core i5 or i7 laptop or desktop processor for your live stream, simply because a i5 or an i7 from the 2nd generation onward should have enough processing power for what we need. The i3 is possible as well. However, I think anything less than sort of a 5th generation i3 will possibly be a little bit too slow, because the i3 is the slowest of the Intel processors. And if you've got an i9, that's even better. That's sort of the top of the line, but those are quite expensive. So I would imagine you probably don't have one of those. So what we're looking for is i3, i5, i7. If it's i3, the number must start with a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. If it's an i5 or an i7, it needs to start with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. And the reason that I say that is because each generation is about 10 to 15% faster. So if you don't have a laptop, or your laptop doesn't meet the criteria, and you're looking at buying a new laptop, I would strongly recommend going for something newer rather than older, because it's going to last you a bit longer. As I said, this laptop is a 2014 model, and it's lasted me since 2014, because when I bought it, I bought the i7. So if you can afford to spend the extra bucks and go for an 8th generation i7, I'd strongly recommend doing it. You can obviously source laptops online at various computer shops, or alternatively, you can use Facebook Market as well to find some decent secondhand laptops. You can actually find decent secondhand i7 laptops for as little as 3,500 Rand. So at the end of the day, you've got to weigh up the odds, what's going to work best for you depending on what you currently have. Like I said, you can also look into the desktop option, because it's going, and then you obviously just leave it in your church or whatever. And if you go for a desktop option, you're probably going to pay even less. So you've just got to work out what's going to work best for you. But at the end of the day, it needs to be i3, i5, or i7 processor. And what you're looking for as well is the cores and logical processes. As you can see, my laptop is running 4 cores and 8 logical processors. The minimum amount that I would recommend in terms of core and processor is a minimum of 2 cores and 4 logical processors, or 4 threads. So if you're considering an i3, that is also something that you should strongly look at to see if it has a minimum of 2 cores and 4 logical processors. Because if I'm correct, some i3s can have 2 cores, 2 logical processors, in which case I think it's going to be a little bit too slow. I understand that some of what I might be saying might be going a little bit over your head. I do apologize, but I've tried to make it as simple as possible in terms of the i3, i5, i7, in terms of the generation of the processor, and in terms of the amount of cores and logical processes. Those are the things that we need to understand. If you don't understand what I've said, please feel free to contact me. I'll help you out as best I can. If you've got a laptop or desktop that you're considering buying and you're not sure if it's good enough, you're also more than welcome to contact me, and I'll be more than glad to help you make the decision for that. So That's the first basic thing that we need to check for a desktop or a laptop is our processor. The second thing that we need to look at is the amount of RAM. So if I browse down here, you can see it says installed RAM, 16 gigabytes. Now, 16 gigabytes is quite a lot. And the reason I've got that is because I use this computer for video processing and the like. However, for live streaming, I wouldn't recommend anything slower than 4 gigabytes or anything less than 4 gigabytes of RAM. So if it's got 1 gigabyte of RAM or 2 gigabytes of RAM, it's simply too slow. 4 gigabytes is the bare minimum. However, I would more likely recommend that you try to get 8 gigabytes because 8 gigabytes is becoming sort of the minimum standard for most software and stuff these days. And 4 gigabytes is slowly being phased out. The beautiful thing about RAM though is usually desktop or laptop, you can at least upgrade the RAM. Whereas if you buy a laptop, what the processor that it has is what it has. There's nothing you can do to change it apart from upgrading your laptop. Desktop, different story. You can always buy new processors and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get into that for the sake of this video. So those are the two things we need to check on is our processor and our RAM. A minimum of 4 gigabytes of RAM and a minimum of a 5th generation i3 or a minimum of a 2nd generation i5 or i7 should be more than sufficient for what we need in terms of hardware for the laptops. If you've got one of these i5s or i7s and they're older, like this particular model i7 that I've got, and you notice that it's running a bit slow, something that you can also consider doing is doing a fresh install of Windows, literally a clean slate install of Windows on your device. One of the churches that we worked with had a 4th generation i5, and when we started out their live stream on that computer was just too slow. So after we did a fresh install of Windows 10 and reinstalled the programs and software and everything, it worked perfectly. So sometimes a fresh install of Windows 10 can give your older model laptop a second wind for what we need it for. So that is what I'd recommend in terms of hardware for the laptop. The next thing that we need to look at is the ports on the laptop, because there are certain ports that we'll need for our live stream. Otherwise, if we don't have those ports, there are also certain adapters that we can make use of with those ports. Okay, so with regards to ports on your laptop or your desktop, the first thing that you're going to need is pretty much something that they all already have, and that is USB ports. As you can see over here, you're going to need those to plug in your video source, either be it, directly via USB like with a webcam, or via the video capture device, which will once again plug into USB. But like I said, most computers already have that, so we don't need to stress too much about that. The next port that we need to look at is this one here, which is an HDMI port, or alternatively this one at the back, which is a VGA port. You're going to use these two ports to send signals from your laptop out to your projectors in your church, or if you're not running projectors, at least a second screen, because we're going to need either a projector or a second screen to make the software work, but more about that later. So if your computer only has an HDMI port and your system or your projectors are only running VGA, it's quite simple to fix that. All you need to do is go and buy an adapter like this. On the one end, it's HDMI, so it'll plug into the HDMI port on the laptop, like that. And then on the other end, it's a VGA female, which you can then go and plug your projector cables into. However, this laptop is an older one, so it still comes standard with the VGA output for that. So depending on your projector or your second screen, you'll obviously make use of either the VGA port or the HDMI port to output the signals from your laptop to the church's projectors. Okay, so the next ports that we're going to need to look at is once again something that your laptop should come standard with. Desktops maybe not always, but generally they do, and that is the sound ports. Now, if you look on the screen, this particular laptop has 3 different sound ports, which is quite handy because we actually need 2 of them. So you need the microphone one and the headphones one. And what we're going to do with those is we're going to run an auxiliary cable from the headphones into our sound desk, and that is so that when we play back videos on our laptop, it'll output to the sound desk so that the people in the church can hear it. And then the second one that we need is another auxiliary cable going into the microphone port, and that is to receive signals from the sound desk into your computer for our live streaming. So if your computer or your laptop has 2 or 3 ports like this, you're in luck. You've got everything that you need. You obviously just need the cables to connect it. However, a lot of newer laptops are now coming with only a single port. Now, this might seem a bit confusing, but it's actually quite easy to fix. All you need to do is buy an adapter like this one that I'm showing you now, where it has a auxiliary cable on one end and then 2 auxiliary females on the other end. And what you'll do with this is you will then plug the male port into your single port on your laptop, and then you will plug this one as a microphone. So you'll plug the sound desk output into there, and this one is the headphone. So these 2 little ports will basically then replace the multiple ports on the laptop. So it's easy enough to fix that. Another thing is maybe sometimes your laptop or your desktop doesn't have a sound card or it's not working. It's okay. You can also buy a USB sound card. They don't usually give you the greatest quality, but the nice thing is you can pick them up relatively cheap. As you can see on the screen right now, I'm displaying an example of one that you can buy from takealot.com. Obviously, for our international audience, you can always go and get it from Amazon or whatever your online shopping is, or alternatively, some electronics and cell phone shops sell them as well. So if you buy this, it's quite simple. You just plug it into your USB port, Windows picks it up, registers it, installs it, and then once again, you just plug your auxiliary cables into the necessary headphones and microphone ports on that. So that's pretty much it in terms of the ports that your devices need. The next thing that our computer or our laptop will obviously need is an internet connection. Now, there are 2 ways that this can happen. This can either happen via Wi-Fi or it can happen via a LAN cable. A LAN cable is more stable. However, the problem with a LAN cable is literally having to run the cable from your computer to the router and stuff. So I'd recommend, if you can, to rather make use of Wi-Fi. Now, most laptops already come with Wi-Fi built into the device, which is quite convenient. So all you need to do then is connect your laptop to the Wi-Fi device, and Bob's your uncle, you're good to go. However, desktop computers don't always come with a built-in Wi-Fi receiver, but once again, it's relatively easy to fix. All you'll need to do is buy a USB Wi-Fi receiver. As you can see on the screen right now is an example of one that you can get from Takealot. And for our international audience, once again, you can get that from Amazon or wherever. You can also pick them up at electronics and cell phone shops. So once this is done, you're able to connect to the Wi-Fi, and then the Wi-Fi itself is also important because you need to make sure that the Wi-Fi that you have is fast enough to carry your signal. So if fiber is available in your area, I would strongly recommend getting a fiber connection to your church. And the reason for that is fiber is the most stable wireless source. It doesn't fluctuate and give you issues and the like. And you don't have to have a massively fast fiber line. A simple 10 up, 10 down Wi-Fi fiber connection should suffice. Otherwise, there are also the option of, cell phone 4G routers and the like. These can also work. However, their internet connection is a little bit more unstable, but nonetheless, if you want to go live, it's obviously imperative that you have some form of a connection to the internet and that your laptop is able to connect to that device. So that's pretty much it in terms of laptops, desktops, and the various hardware and ports that we need for these devices. If I've said all of this and it's not making sense to you, you're more than welcome to contact me for assistance. Otherwise, you can maybe also ask somebody in your church who understands computers, and they might also be able to help you regarding this. So the next piece of equipment that we're going to be discussing is one that we spoke about already in this section, and that is either a second screen or a projector. Okay, family, so the next piece of equipment that we need to make our live stream possible is either a projector or a second screen. Obviously, if you're running a church service and you've already got a projector in the church, that's perfect. That's all you need, because at the end of the day, the system that we're using is going to be projecting on our screens in church as well as to our Facebook Live. If you, however, do not have any projectors or screens in church, it is still possible to do the live stream. However, then you will need to go and buy some form of a second monitor. And the reason for that is the programs that we use basically output the video and the lyrics and the graphics and everything to a second monitor or a projector. And then that picture gets captured and sent to Facebook. So for the software to work correctly, it needs some form of a second screen, be it a projector in church or even just a little monitor that you've got sitting next to you. If your church doesn't have projectors or screens and you need to go and buy a monitor, I'd recommend once again going to Facebook Market. You can pick up it doesn't have to be a fancy monitor. It can basically just be a real El Cheapo. The only purpose for the monitor is to basically be able to send a video signal from your laptop out to the second monitor, because if you do that, then the programs can capture the picture and send it to Facebook. But it is not possible to do this live stream system without either a projector or a second monitor where your laptop or computer is outputting to a second screen. So on the screen right now, you can see my projector. It's sitting there on the table, obviously not set up, but I've got it turned to the side specifically that I want to show you the various ports. So as you can see on the screen, there are a couple of different ports on the side of this projector, the one being VGA and the other one being HDMI. Now you can use either of those if your projector has it, as well as if your computer has it. You basically just need to work out what cable is going to be best for you at the end of the day, and obviously depending on what your computer and your projector or your second screen has. And then you basically just need to run a cable from one of those inputs on the projector to the output on your computer. As we discussed previously, it can be HDMI, it can be VGA, it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, for the live stream system to work, we have to have either a projector or a second monitor for the system to work. I'm hoping that the projector is obviously the option that you're going to go for, because the beautiful thing about the system, and the reason that I designed the system the way that it is so that we can create a beautiful projector image for our congregation in our church service, as well as a beautiful video image for the people that are watching our Facebook live stream. So that's basically all I've got to say concerning projectors. How to set the projector up and stuff in church is entirely up to you. Or if you're doing the second monitor, like I said, you can just plonk it on the sound desk next to the laptop just so that it's there. As an example, one of the churches that I worked with, they had projectors, but when I was there, their projectors weren't working. But fortunately, they had a second monitor, so we just plugged that second monitor in, put it next to us on the sound desk, and we were able to do our Facebook live stream, and it worked perfectly. So that's it concerning the projectors or the second screen. As I said, it's something that you're going to need to make use of if you want your live stream to work according to the system that we've got it operating with. And then in the next section, we're going to be discussing the next piece of equipment that we need. And that's something that most churches already have, and that is a sound desk. Okay, family, so the next piece of equipment that we're going to need to make our live stream work is something that most churches already have, and that is a sound desk. Now, churches obviously have a sound desk to be able to chop and change the volumes and the levels, etc., for the various microphones and stuff within the church, and then so that the sounds can then play back through the church speakers, right? So the reason we now need a sound desk, or to make use of your church's sound desk for the live stream, is for two reasons. Firstly, every video and stuff that we play as part of our live stream and as part of our service on the projectors, we will obviously need to capture that in the sound desk to send it to the speakers in the church. But at the same time, we also need to be sending signals from our sound desk back to the laptop so that they can be recorded by the laptop to be sent to our stream. So it's basically a loop in the sense of when we play a video, it goes to the sound desk and it goes to the speakers inside the church. And then everything that the sound desk receives, including the audio from the videos and stuff we play back on the laptop, then goes back to the laptop so that the laptop can receive it so that it can send it to Facebook, if that makes sense. So the reason for this family is we obviously want to capture decent quality audio for our live stream. And the nice thing about having a sound desk in church is it does that. It captures all the microphones and stuff that we have plugged in, all the audio sources. And then when we send it from the sound desk back to the computer then captures it and sends it to Facebook. So in other words, what your church is hearing inside the service is pretty much what Facebook is going to be hearing through your live stream, give or take a little bit of volume maybe. So different churches obviously have different sound desks. Some have big ones, some have small ones, some have analog ones, some have digital ones. But the principle of how we get the sound desk to work for our live stream is pretty much standard, irrespective of what system you may have in your church. So if you look on the screen now, you can see our ministry sound desk, nothing too fancy about it. And whether it be a 12 channel or a 4 channel or a 32 channel, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, on the sound desk, there are only 2 things that we really need for the live stream. And on my sound desk, that is these 2 sets of ports up here at the top. So the 2 sets of ports that we basically need on our sound desk, irrespective of what sound desk it is that we're running, is an auxiliary input, which are these here for me. As you can see, it's auxiliary or RCA cables. Basically these red and white cables. So we need those for the input, like I said, so that the church can obviously hear when we play back videos and the like through our system. Then the church can hear it because the sound desk is receiving it and it's pushing it out to the speakers. So that's the first one. So to connect this to our computer, we need a cable like the one I just showed you that has the RCA on the one end and a audio auxiliary jack on the other end. So these will then go into our sound desk, and this will then plug into our computer. And now our computer is sending sound to our sound desk, and we can obviously, play with the volume levels and stuff and adjust it on our sound desk. So that's the first part. Now, the second ports that we need are these 2 at the back on mine, which basically say rec out. Now, this works exactly the same way as what we've just done with the line in the sense of we plug these RCA cables into the sound desk, and we plug the audio jack into the computer. And what this does is it now allows the sound desk to speak to the computer. In other words, everything that the sound desk is projecting onto your church's speakers is now being sent back to the computer so that the computer can capture it and send it to Facebook. So these are the basic 2 ports, one in and one out, that pretty much every sound desk should have in some way or another. If your sound desk doesn't have an auxiliary input port, you can always use one of these regular large jacks or something like that and just make an adaptation or an adapter, which you can often buy from the cell phone shops and stuff like that. So now our sound desk is receiving the audio from our laptop when we play back stuff, and our laptop is receiving everything that comes through the sound desk when we set it up like this. Some of the more advanced sound desks also come with a USB cable, and in that case, you don't need to run these cables. All you have to do is connect your sound desk to your computer via USB cable, and then the USB cable basically serves as those. So if your sound desk does have a USB cable, I would strongly recommend you use that as opposed to what I've just shown you now, for the reason that it's just higher quality and stuff. Now, our sound desk does have a USB port up at the top here. However, that's not the kind of USB port I'm talking about. That port there is mainly just to plug a USB flash drive in so that you can play back MP3 files and the like. No, there'll usually be a port for it on the back here, and it won't actually be a physical USB port. It'll be the other end of it, basically. So it'll be like a printer cable or something like that. So you can run it like that, or if you don't have the USB option, most other sound desks should have these options. And that's all you need, basically, are those 2 cables and a sound desk so that your sound desk and your computer can speak to each other the way that they need to. Right, so that's basically it concerning the sound desk and how it works. If you don't understand what I've just said, show this part of the video to your sound desk, to your media guys, and I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out. Just if you're struggling with it, just play around with it, play with the volume, see if it's coming in, see if it's going out On the laptop, you'll be able to see if it's receiving it, which we'll discuss at a later stage in this video, and the like. So in the next section of this video, we're going to be discussing the various cables that you'll need, which I've pretty much already covered, but I'm just going to go through it again. The various cables that you'll need to connect the various devices together so that you can have everything connected for your live stream as well as for your church service on the projector screens. Okay, so in this section, we're going to be discussing the various cables and adapters that you're going to need to be able to connect all the equipment up to your laptop correctly so that we can run our live stream system. So if you look on the table right now, I've got all the various pieces of equipment that we've covered so far. Don't be intimidated by these just yet. I'm now going to show you the various cables that we need to connect these up, and at a later stage in this video, I'm going to show you how we can connect it up. So the first cable that we're going to need is the one that I've got in my hands right now, which is an auxiliary to RCA adapter. We're going to need 2 of these cables to connect our sound desk to our laptop and our laptop to our sound desk. So you can see it's got the auxiliary jack on this end and it's got the RCA on this end, and we're going to need 2 of these. The 2 auxiliary jacks go into our laptop and the 2 RCAs go into our sound desk. And that is what allows our computer to speak to our sound desk and our sound desk to speak to our computer. As I mentioned earlier, if your sound desk has a built-in USB sound card, you don't need to worry about these 2 cables. All you have to do is run that USB cable from your sound desk into your laptop, and your laptop should then install the drivers where it will then see your sound desk as an external sound card. If you've got this option, I'd recommend this over using the RCA to auxiliary adapter, simply because it's less cables and it often gives you higher quality sound as well. However, if your sound desk doesn't have this option available, then you will need the 2 auxiliary to RCA adapters connected to your laptop and your sound desk. The next piece of equipment that we're going to need is a cable that is going to connect our laptop or our computer to our projector. So if you look on the screen right now, I've got one of those in my hands. This is the most commonly used one, which is a VGA cable. You can see it's got 2 of these VGA males on either end, and one end is going to be plugged into our laptop and the other end into our projector. Another option for this kind of cable would be to get an HDMI cable, but this depends entirely on the inputs and outputs that are available on your laptop as well as the projector. My personal recommendation, if you've got both VGA and HDMI available to you, would be to go HDMI, simply because HDMI usually gives you higher quality video that comes out of the cable. However, I also understand when it's spanning over a long distance that the HDMI cable can sometimes work out to be a lot more expensive than the VGA cable. So you must just work out which one is going to be the most cost effective and the most convenient for you to use, depending on your projectors and the outputs on your computer, or if your church doesn't have projectors, once again, to your second monitor, because we need some form of second screen for our system to work. So if you look on the screen right now, I've got an example of one of those HDMI cables. You can see it's got 2 HDMI males on either end. This is just a short little one just for this example, but you can get these up to 20 meters. If you've got the HDMI option, it's quite simple. One end goes into your computer and the other end goes into your projector, and then they will speak to each other. So the following cables that I'm going to speak about now are going to vary depending on the setup that you've chosen to use, especially where your cameras are concerned. If you are going the option with a cell phone or a webcam, you will need a USB extension cord. As you can see on the screen right now, I've got one of those in my hands. It's got a USB male on the one end and a female on the other end. And the way that this is going to work is simply you're going to plug the USB male into your computer, and you're going to run the span of the cable to the front of your church or wherever it is you've got your webcam or your cell phone set up, and you're going to plug a USB cable from your cell phone or your webcam into the female port of this USB extension cord. The purpose for this cable is simply to span the distance between your computer and your webcam or your cell phone, which will generally be in the front of the church. These USB extension cords, you can usually get up to 20 meters and they're fairly inexpensive. You only need a USB 2 extension cord. If you go the USB 3 option at this distance, even though it's better, it will cost you a lot more. So that is how the cable that you'll use to connect your webcam and your cell phone to your desktop or to your computer if you are doing it over a distance and if you're making use of that option. If you are not making use of the webcam and cell phone option, then you don't need to worry about this cable. Perhaps you've chosen to go the more professional route by making use of a handy cam or a DSLR or a professional studio camera. In that case, like I said, you're not going to need the USB port, but instead you're going to need to get adapters and another HDMI cable. So the first adapter that you're going to need for a setup, if you are using handy cams or DSLRs or professional cameras, the first piece of equipment you're going to need is a video capture card like the one I've got in my hand right now. This card simply has a USB male on the one end and an HDMI female on the other end. Now this is going to be on the computer side. You're going to simply plug this into your computer and you're going to plug an HDMI cable into this port here. And then you're going to run that HDMI cable from your computer to your camera. So in this case, you're probably going to need to get an extra adapter to connect that HDMI cable to your camera, depending on what it's got. But that adapter that you're probably going to need is this little guy here, which is an HDMI mini to an HDMI cable. So that HDMI cable that's running from your laptop to your camera, you're going to plug into here, and then you're going to plug this into your camera. So if you look on the screen right now, you've got a perfect example of how this works. This is your computer end where you've got the video capture card plugged into your computer. Here's the HDMI cable plugged into it, running to this device here, which will then plug into your camera and will allow these two to speak to each other. And once again, as I said, this HDMI cable can be up to 20 meters so that your camera can speak to your computer and the like. And this will work obviously for a camera that works on the system. So these are the basic cables and adapters that you may need for your setup to all be connected correctly, depending on the setup that you've got. Each person's setup will obviously vary depending on the laptop's inputs and outputs, the sound desk's inputs and outputs, the cameras that you're using, as well as the inputs and outputs available on your projector or second screen. So these are the basics. There are also some of the other adapters that I've spoken about in the various parts of this video. Depending on your setup, you'll just need to decide what's going to work best for you, what works with your system, and then you can get everything connected up and working. So I want to encourage you to stick around. In the next section, I'm going to be briefly introducing you to the programs that we're going to be using to take all of these input and output signals to make them work so that they can be sent to your church's projectors, your church's sound, as well as to our Facebook Live. And then after that, I'm going to show you how we can use these cables and use all of this equipment to be connected up correctly. So we've discussed the various pieces of equipment that we need to make our live stream work. Now I'd like to share with you a little bit about the 2 free programs that we're going to be using to allow everything to speak to each other, to project everything in our church service, as well as to send everything to Facebook. Now, as I said, these are 2 free programs. In this section, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to them and explain a little bit about how they work. However, if you stick around for parts 4, 5, and 6, in those sections, I will discuss in detail how to download these programs, how to set them up, and how to use them to run your service and to live stream your service to Facebook. So the 2 programs that we're going to be using for this is VideoSom and OBS Studio. Now, these 2 programs serve 2 different purposes. VideoSom is a free worship service program. It basically is an all-inclusive program to run your entire church service. You can run your graphics, you can run your videos, you can run your songs, you can run your song lyrics, you can display scriptures. And the beautiful thing I like about VideoSom is it allows you to make use of a video feed as well, which is obviously important so that the people on Facebook can actually see us while we're preaching and while the service is going on. There are many other free worship programs out there. However, from what I've seen so far, none of them allow the video feed source like VideoSom does, which is why I particularly love VideoSom. And the beautiful thing is it's completely free, no strings attached, no adverts, nothing. It's an absolute blessing to the body of Christ. So there's obviously free worship programs, and then there's also various paid ones as well, which some of them do allow you to have video sources and stuff like that. But once again, it's paid. And what's the purpose of this video? To teach you how to live stream your church service like a pro, but with a budget, without having to go and spend thousands of rands on software and programs and hardware and equipment and all these kinds of things. That's the purpose of this video, which is why I've specifically chosen VideoSom, because it's completely free and it does pretty much everything that we need it to. So that's the first program. So the second program that we're going to be using is called OBS Studio. And OBS Studio is a very commonly used free software for live streaming. It's got a massive variety of applications, and for this video, or for this how-to, we're basically going to just be using OBS Studio to capture the video and audio sources from our church service and send them to Facebook. So OBS Studio, as I said, has a variety of sources. However, we're just going to simply be using it to send the necessary signals from our church to Facebook Live. So let's take a quick look at the two programs that we're going to be using. So this is our first program, VideoSom. This is obviously the basics. It's got nothing in it, nothing set up yet. However, if you stick around for section 4 and 5, I will show you in detail how to get this correctly configured and how to set up your church's agenda in the agenda section over here so that you can run your entire church services projections through VideoSom. It really is a wonderful program. And then the second program that we're going to be using, as I've mentioned, is OBS Studio. Now this once again is just the basics of OBS Studio, what it looks like once you've installed it and downloaded it. And in section 6, I will explain in details how you can install it, how you need to configure it and set it up. And in section 7, I will share with you how you use OBS Studio to go live on Facebook. So that's the basics of the two programs that we're going to be using for our live streams according to the system. As I've said, there are other options available, and if you're more comfortable with using those other options, you're more than welcome to. The beautiful thing about this video is I've created it in such a way that I cover the basics, and if you want to vary from it and experiment with other methods, you are more than welcome to. But this puts the basics and the foundation in place that you will need to successfully live stream your church service like a pro on a nice and tight budget. So thus concludes the section on what equipment you will need to do your live stream. We've spoken about cameras, laptops, projectors, sound desks, cables, as well as the free programs that we're going to be making use of. I'd like to invite you to join me for the next section where I'll be speaking to you about how we can set up our video and our audio to get everything connected up, to get everything speaking to each other the correct way so that we're set up and ready to go for our live stream service. Thank you.